stupid they're doing? They're running us around.
Okay, so this will be another contemplative one about something that I think I've tweeted or posted a few times about software being a material category rather than a product category, and just kind of unpacking what I mean by that, and also going through my own realization that it's not as simple as that, but it's sometimes it does seem as simple as that, and why that is. So what I mean first, software is a material category rather than a product category, is just saying, well, I see software or more abstractly like computation as a building material, right? It's a choice that you make to make something out of that, just like you would with plastic or metal or combinations of things, right? So this comes from a perspective of thinking about design, and design being a deliberation over the best ways to satisfy a purpose, right? You start with a purpose and you think, how can we satisfy this purpose the best way? And one of those things that you deliberate over is the materials that you're going to use to satisfy that purpose. And so this assertion of software being a material category, not a product category, comes from this recognition that, when you're talking about software and, things like software eating the world, what you're doing is you're skipping that part of the design deliberation, and you're just assuming that software is the best way to achieve something. And to be clear, like, materials for satisfying a purpose are not just physical things or building materials like code. It's other things as well. It's like people power, it's political movements, right? Protests, petitions, fighting back in that way. It's social movements, and anything else, right? It's like whatever you find through the design process, you deliberate over possible ways to satisfy a purpose, and whatever you find is the best way to do it. Of course, in any design process, there's going to be limitations, and you're probably going to be starting from a point where you are limited to what materials you can use, right? And most of the time that's going to be a financial limitation, right? We can only afford these plastics or these metals. We can only make it out of software that uses this programming language because that's where the most developers are, and the developers that we can afford are particularly skilled in this area. But this is an example of how the more you think about it, the deeper it gets, and you kind of flip-flop between this being a simple idea or a complex idea. And like what I just said about programming languages, a programming language is actually the material, and there's different materials. But then you're still trapping yourself into that software world, right? You're still making that decision that software is the best way to satisfy a purpose. In that aspect, you can look at industrial designers, and industrial designers particularly focus on physical products, and they'll deliberate over the best materials, and they'll think about plastics and acrylics and glass and metals. But even in that case, you're going to have industrial designers who prefer to work with certain materials. Right, you're going to have acrylic designers and metal or wood designers. But even then, they're probably specializing in a specific product category, right? They're probably doing furniture, chairs, maybe decorative things like vases and bowls and things like that, where, acrylics come into play. Yeah, so I think this is an introduction to what I mean by that, and hopefully an illustration of how much there is to think about in this area.